kind of love my new Rifle Paper Company rug, guys, and I feel like it's the perfect backdrop for my books. Hopefully by this point I will have uploaded my Rifle Paper Company haul, because I did buy a couple other things, some shoes and some stationery. But anyway, it's a lovely rug, and here's a lovely book. I just finished P.G. Wodehouse, Service with a Smile. This takes place at Blandings, so we have the wonderful Lord Emsworth and his pig, of course. But we also have the Earl of Ickenham, who just spreads sweetness and light. It's what he does. Lord Ickenham and the crazy adventures he gets up to are just hilarious. I love this. I always strive when I can to spread sweetness and light. There have been several complaints about it. P.G. Wodehouse is just so good. There are so many hilarious passages. I love this. It was the practice of Lord Ickenham, when visiting a country house, to look about him, before doing anything else, for a hammock to which he could withdraw after breakfast and lie thinking deep thoughts. Though, like Abu Ben Adhem, a man who loved his fellow men, he made it an invariable rule to avoid them after the morning meal with an iron firmness. I like this too. It was imperative for the good of his soul that Lord Tilbury should receive an occasional punch in the bank balance, and to have neglected this opportunity of encouraging his spiritual growth would have been mistaken kindness. His guardian angel, who could follow a piece of reasoning all right if you explained it to him carefully, apologized and said he hadn't thought of that. Forget the whole thing, the guardian angel said. Yes, so I very much enjoyed Service with a Smile. I'm trying to think if there's another book with Lord Ickenham, or if I've read it, because it seems like he's probably one of the recurring characters. P.G. Wodehouse has so many recurring characters, and it's so fun how they like kind of intersect. I need to look up, I'm sure online somewhere, there's like a sort of plot map. I also love Leave It to Smith, P. Smith, the P is silent. And that book takes place at Blandings. And of course that has, I think, Baxter. The impressive Baxter is Lord Emsworth's secretary in that book. Lord Emsworth's sister is constantly trying to push a secretary on him. In this one, it's Lavender Briggs. And again, I feel like Lavender Briggs possibly makes some other appearances. P.G. Wodehouse is fun because you can really pick up any book and dive right into it and enjoy it hugely. There isn't really an order that you at all need to read them in, but sometimes they mention other escapades that are in other books, and of course you do have the same characters, so you just can't go wrong with P.G. Wodehouse. In my last reading vlog, I talked about how I was planning to read an Edith Wharton novel. This is actually 3 novels in one. House of Mirth, Custom of the Country, and Age of Innocence. I posted a poll on my Insta story, and you guys voted for The Age of Innocence. It was actually a pretty close poll, but I did go with Age of Innocence. It didn't take me too long to read. This looks like it's all going to be really long, but since it's 3 novels, none of them are actually all too long. Whenever I read Edith Wharton, I don't know, I just feel like there's something a little bit lacking, and partly I think that was purposeful because she's writing about, high society in New York, and it is like a very kind of shallow society. So she calls it the Age of Innocence because in a way all of these people are innocents, and they protect themselves from thinking about anything unpleasant. They just shut it out and kind of shut themselves off from it. So in a way it makes sense that her books feel kind of shallow, because I think she wants you to feel that. She wants you to be in this world that obviously had some shortcomings. But see, I guess I prefer Jane Austen because, Jane Austen's world, I think you could also say in many ways was kind of shallow, based on appearances, had lots of rules, but her books don't feel at all shallow. Her heroines and her heroes always, they're living in this society, but they also are a little bit apart from society. Their judgment isn't sort of enslaved to their culture or enslaved to the society that they happen to live in. It feels like they have their own kind of independent personality. And I feel like in Jane Austen's works and in other works, there are just so many scenes, so many little observations that I can kind of take with me and that really help me in my own life, that really inspire me or help me get through a rough time or help me understand something that I'm not able to understand. And, much as I admire Edith Wharton's writings, she is a just masterful writer. I mean, her skill with words is amazing. There are constantly passages and sentences where the way she phrases things is just so, like it's like a sword. Like it just goes straight to the point, and she just cuts through and kind of like stages things in a way you had never thought of them before. So she is absolutely a masterful writer, and yet she doesn't give me like those little kind of like gems, I guess you could say, that I can take with me and that help me later on. Like I read this actually a couple weeks ago now. I just hadn't gotten around to filming a little, review about it, and I can't even remember the main character's name. Oh gosh, Archer? Is that it? That was his first name, or maybe his last name. It was actually a little challenging to keep track of, especially in the beginning, like who all the families of New York were and how they were all related. Another thing that kind of just didn't click for me, I don't mean to be bashing this book. It wasn't a bad book. It just didn't click for me the way some books do. And I think it's interesting when that happens to analyze like why, like what was it that was kind of lacking in this that I find in other books. And one thing, to go back to Jane Austen, because Jane Austen is kind of, at least for me, my sort of standard against which I judge all other books, which is completely unfair because she's basically an unattainable standard. But I really like in her book and in other books the way you kind of get into the perspective of different characters. Like when Mr. Collins writes a letter, like he's not really a likable character, but even though you sort of like are laughing at him and like, wow, what is up with this guy? You're also kind of transported into his world, like into his kind of mental landscape. Like you can follow his reasoning, even if you don't agree with it, you can kind of on some level connect to it. And I feel like that happens with so many other characters. It always is fascinating to me in Jane Austen when you actually see things from the perspective of another character, because for the most part, the narrative usually focuses on like the main heroine. But sometimes you jump into somebody else's shoes, like in Pride and Prejudice. There's a scene where we go to Charlotte's house and like see things from Charlotte's point of view. And in the novel Emma, there's a scene where we see things from Mr. Knightley's point of view. And I just think those are so fascinating and so convincing. Like when she's talking about another character, even if that character doesn't agree with the main character, I feel like I understand them, whereas in The Age of Innocence, and again, like with the kind of shallowness, this might have been sort of a purposeful literary device that Edith Wharton was using, but like I never felt like we got out of Archer's perspective, because Archer is kind of criticizing the society around him and, noticing its shortcomings and is frustrated. So I feel like all the characters that you see, you're always seeing them through his eyes. They're not convincing in their own right. They almost never become real in that way. It's like they're all sort of not figments of Archer's imagination, but it's like we're only seeing them through what he's frustrated about with them. Like we're only seeing them through his eyes. And actually I think by the end you start to question a lot of what you're seeing through Archer's eyes, and you start to question, well, does this guy really have a right to complain or to criticize, because isn't he himself really integrated in this society, and when he could stand up for himself, he doesn't. So yeah, this didn't quite hit the mark for me, although I am glad I read it. It's the first time I'd read Age of Innocence, and I'm sure at some point I will also read The House of Mirth, because like I said, she is an amazing author, and her writing, I feel like it's almost taking a lesson in how to write precisely. Speaking of Jane Austen, I have been reading some Jane Austen lately. I have here Jane Austen's letters, which I absolutely love. It's so fun to read her letters to her family, to her sisters. It is difficult because she's like referencing all of these different acquaintances and extended family members and places they've been, and little things from their family patois, and you have no idea what they mean. But the more you read them, though, the easier it becomes, and especially if you've read some biographies about Jane Austen, then you kind of have a better idea. I just love how it's the exact same voice in her letters that is in her books, and I think that's how she became such a good writer, is that she wrote just countless letters to her sister. It's fun when she's writing to her sister Cassandra. The majority of these letters are to Cassandra. Of course, letters were how they had to communicate back then. They didn't have phones, they didn't have Skype, but I feel like her letters kind of are like a sort of rolling diary, or like almost as if you turned on Skype with a family member and like kind of filled them in on what's going on. So it's fun in that sense to just get a sense of her daily lives. I feel like there are so many stories in here that are kind of half told. Like here she's writing to Cassandra, "Do not imagine that your picture of your tete-a-tete with Sir B makes any changes in our expectations here. He could not be really reading though he held the newspaper in his hand. He was making up his mind to the deed and the manner of it. I think you will have a letter from him soon. So she's joking that they thought he was going to propose. And come on, does this scene not exactly remind you of the scene with Mr. Darcy in Pride and Prejudice? That scene where Mr. Darcy and Lizzie are both sitting in the library and like he never speaks to her like for half an hour or an hour together. He like resolutely adheres to his book or newspaper. That totally reminds me of that. Just the way she expresses herself. I wish I could help you in your needlework. I have 2 hands and a new thimble that lead a very easy life. I've been getting on with my knitting here. I'm pretty sure I showed this in the last reading vlog. So I finished the lace. This was all a lace increase. And now I'm onto the stripes. I just love the yellow here. It's such a pretty yellow. And it's so fun, actually. Oh, do not slip off. Do not slip off. It's really fun when you have 2 different colors because one row you're knitting the blue and then the next row it's the yellow, and it's just fun to have the difference. So I think I need 34 of these stripes total, and I'm only about halfway there. And then I'll switch and I will do red and yellow, and then it will all finish off with a red lace decrease. As you can see, there are quite a lot of stitches on this needle, so this is taking a long time. The instructions for difficulty level said that this was easy, which I would not agree that this was easy. The first shawl that I knitted from a Web's kit, that actually was a lot easier. I'm glad I did that one first because it was a good kind of warm up to this. I think somebody asked if I could link them in the description of my last reading blog, and I forgot to, so I will link them in the description of this one. Well, friends, I have been very much enjoying A Suitable Boy, which I've been meaning to start for absolute ages. I know Kate Howe, who I really enjoy here on BookTube, she read this, I think, a while ago, and it's been on my list ever since then. And of course, lately I've been loving watching Indian films, so this book is of course set in India. I was pretty intimidated by the size of this thing. It is, how many pages is it? Oh my goodness. 1,349 pages, but I feel like it has been going faster than I would have expected. There are so many characters. If you don't like a book that like hops around too much and like, you know, leaves off on one storyline and picks up on another, and then, you know, hundreds of pages later picks up on that original storyline, then this probably isn't going to be the book for you, because there is quite a lot of that. I had a hard time, definitely, especially at the beginning, figuring out, okay, who's this person? Like, have we met them yet? Like, what do we know about them? How are they related to everyone else? There is actually a little family tree here in the front. I think that when I first realized that I was really going to like this book was about 40 pages in, when they go to this bookshop. The Imperial Book Depot was one of the 2 best bookshops in town. Since the bookshop prided itself on its academic as well as general stock, the proprietors unashamedly collared university teachers who wandered in to browse, sat them down with a cup of tea and a couple publishers' lists, and made them tick off the titles that they thought the bookshop should consider ordering. That's so cool! And I love this. After classes, Lada and Melody, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing those names wrong, both dressed casually in their usual salwar kameez. I'm gonna have to look up what that is. Went to, oh dear, the words here, Nabiganj, to wander around and have a cup of coffee at the Blue Danube Coffee House. This activity, known to university students as ganjing, they could afford to indulge in about once a week. As they passed the Imperial Book Depot, they were drawn magnetically in. Each wandered off to her favorite shelves and subjects. That is always what happens to me in a bookstore. I love how Lana pauses in the scientific section whenever she opened a scientific book and saw whole paragraphs of incomprehensible words and symbols. She felt a sense of wonder at the great territories of learning that lay beyond her. And then they quote a whole segment, and I love how she describes this, of just the sort of reading experience. She read the paragraph again, looking serious. We also recall, and with these preliminaries, drew her into a compact with the author of these verities and mysteries. The words were assured, and therefore reassuring. And then, this very next paragraph, she smiled to herself now, not aware of her surroundings. Still holding the book, she looked up, and this was how a young man, who had been standing not far from her, was included unintentionally in her smile. He was pleasantly startled and smiled back at her. So sweet. I love how she meets this guy in the bookshop. See, just when things are like kind of getting to a climax, we leave Lana and we don't see or hear from her again for like another couple hundred pages. I wish now I had been more on top of copying out my favorite quotes, or at least like the pages, because there have been so many interesting little like vignettes. I like this description of how Lada's mother never throws away birthday cards, and in fact she like cuts them up and like recreates a card whenever she needs one for someone else. But the problem is that she like is kind of sentimentally attached to all her cards, so when she needs to like give one away, it's like she has to choose which is like the least painful to part with, which I just posted my Rifle Paper Company vlog the other week, and I was talking about how like my calendars are so pretty I can never throw them away, and I definitely do the same thing with cards. Like I can never get rid of a pretty card, and if I have to send my last one to someone else, it's like, oh, do I really want to send this one? I've really been enjoying watching Bollywood movies. I don't speak Hindi and I've never been to India, so I feel like this book actually is filling in a lot of little gaps. Like, and obviously I have like the English, you know, translations on, but like there's still a lot of things you miss, like if you don't sort of know the cultural meaning behind them. And this book is so descriptive of like every last little thing, but to me they're all mostly all new things, so I actually found that really helpful. And there have been a couple moments when I've been like, oh, that's what that meant in that movie. Just a really fascinating dive into kind of so many different parts of Indian life, because I mean I'm only 400 pages in so far, only 400, but are so many different families, different professions, politics, and I feel like all the characters are drawn really convincingly. Like you really enter into their world for the space of however many pages they have. Of course, the different religions. I loved this description here. There was still an hour before the noon prayer. He thought of the call to prayer which he heard every morning, first from his local mosque, and then at slightly staggered intervals from other mosques across the city. What he particularly liked in the morning call to prayer was the twice-repeated line that did not appear in the azan later in the day: prayer is better than sleep. Music, too, was prayer to him, and some mornings he would be up long before dawn to sing Lalit or some other early morning rag. Then the first words of the azan, Allahu Akbar, God is great, would vibrate across the rooftops in the cool air, and his ears would lie in wait for the sentence that admonished those who attempted to sleep on. I love how they capture so many just small moments like that, like listening for a phrase called out across the city. There's so many of those details, and it really draws you in. This is actually where I just left off, but this is such a great paragraph. Meanwhile, Lada, who was in the thickest part of the party, felt as if she was swimming in a sea of language. She was quite amazed by the glitter and glory of it all. Sometimes a half-comprehensible English wave would rise, sometimes an incomprehensible Bengali one, like magpies cackling over baubles, or discovering occasional gems and imagining them to be baubles. The excited guests chattered on. Okay, this is the last passage for now, I promise, but this I love so much. Tipkanar was fond of making remarks such as, "It is all the void," at breakfast, thus casting a mystical aura over the scrambled eggs. And then just down here, after he had finished his song, unembarrassed by its tunelessness, for all pitches, no doubt, stood equal before the void. I've been making some progress on my hydrangea wreath. Here are the little, or not little, they're actually pretty big, hydrangea flowers coming into shape. You have to make a cut here, and then make it into a little cone. And then you cover the cone with the tiny flowers, which I'm supposed to get 24 onto each of these. So I'm trying to like pack them in pretty closely and curl up the petals. But I think they'll be so, so pretty when they're done. And of course I have to still punch out the leaves and get those into shape. So here's my Easter dress for this year. Look at the pattern. Isn't it so fun? There's a little bunny. There's like a pink jaguar. This is Kath Kidston. They had free shipping to the US. My Easter pajamas were on sale. Look at the rabbits. Isn't that adorable? So here are my Easter shoes. I got these from ModCloth a couple years ago, but I think they actually match this dress really well. Just thinking how these flowers that I'm making for the paper wreath almost look like a sort of little fascinator hat. What do you think? Would that be cute? I think it would actually kind of match the dress too. I wish hats never went out of fashion. Whenever I look at like photos from the 20s and 30s and see the fabulous like hats and fascinators women used to wear, they look amazing. So if you watched my real life inspiration behind Disney World video that I posted last week, you'll know about the Martin and Osa giveaway that was happening on my Instagram. It actually just wrapped up, so I just announced the winners over on Instagram. Congratulations if you won. These are the books. I'm gonna get them shipped out. Some of you may recognize these cute animals from the Zawadi gift shop at the Animal Kingdom Lodge. I thought they'd be a fun prop for my Instagram photo. But yeah, thank you so much to everyone who entered. There were over 100 entries, which kind of blew me away. So I hope if you didn't win that you do manage to check out the book sometime. Thank you again so much to the Martin and Osa Safari Museum in Kansas for sending the books for the giveaway. I love the random connections that you make through BookTube or Bookstagram. The Martin and Osa Johnson Museum has definitely been one of the most memorable connections that I've made, and it was so fun to be able to do the giveaway. Another fun random BookTube connection, recently someone posted on a Shakespeare review I had done a couple years ago, and it turned out it was from a student, and their teacher had assigned the class to watch my video and then like answer some questions about the play, and the student said they'd really enjoyed it, and then a friend from his class also commented, so shout out to you guys, to that class, if you're watching. You never know where your video is gonna go or who's gonna find it on YouTube, but that's part of the fun. Well friends, I thought I would give you a couple last updates to finish this reading vlog up. I've recently been reading Anne of Windy Willows. This is just such a charming cover. I need to do a book haul because I did actually order a couple of these from Book Depository, and I recently went to a book sale and got some things. This is the Virago Modern Classics edition. Just look at that cover. Isn't it so beautiful? Honestly, all of the covers. You can see a couple of the other ones down in the corner there. But I have the Virago Modern Classics of Emily of New Moon, and they have lovely covers. And when I saw on Book Depository that there were Anne of Green Gables by the same, I think it must be the same artist, it's the same kind of style, I obviously had to add them to my collection. I picked this one to read first because of the cover. It just looks so springtimey. I did get a picture of it with some cherry blossoms, so I'll have to put that on the screen here. I meant to go outside and like film a segment outside, but I just never got around to it. I went outside plenty, went for lots of walks, and enjoyed all the beautiful leaves. This is such a beautiful time of year with the trees just full of flowers, and everywhere you look, like there's a white tree and a pink tree and a green tree, and just so, so beautiful. So I hope you were able to get out and enjoy the spring as well. I hope you had a very blessed Easter. Anne has been fun to read in the springtime. It seems like everything she looks at is magical. This book follows her, and she is the principal of Summerside High School. A lot of it is her letters to Gilbert. I feel like the first couple of books are the most sort of well knit together. This is certainly also a charming book, but it's also very episodic. Like, it almost reads as a collection of short stories because it feels like each chapter almost is about a different family, a different group of characters. They're all charming and hilarious and such fun stories, although there are a couple of recurring characters throughout. She lives at Windy Willows in the home of two widows, Aunt Kate and Aunt Chatty, with, of course, Rebecca Dew, the housekeeper. Ellen Montgomery is such a charming writer, though, and such a kind of uplifting writer. And I haven't read Anne of Green Gables for a little while, so this has been really fun. And I did get a couple of the other ones, so I'll have to do a book haul very soon. In other news, I have reached page 1000 of A Suitable Boy. There almost isn't room for it and my head in the frame. It's such a large book. There are still like 400 pages to go, maybe only 300. I have to admit, around page 600 or so, I was really starting to flag, but I did skip a bit, Brother Maynard, because overall I do like the story, I like the characters, I like the writing. There are lots of really neat vignettes like I was telling you about. I won't quote too many more. I do love the, I don't know how you pronounce it, Chatterjee family in Calcutta. They just sound like such a fun big family. They're constantly talking to each other in couplets, and some of the couplets are really funny and really witty that apparently they just come up with on the fly. I just like their camaraderie, and especially the scenes where they're all together. That Dipganar is one of the siblings, so the mystical eggs, it's that family. There are some parts that are upsetting or disturbing, but they're not the main focus, and it does cover such a sort of vast array of different events, different families, different places, and yet they're all knit together, I think, pretty darn well. Like, it feels like everybody is somehow connected. In a way, it does feel like kind of just a big, huge, extended family, a really well-woven web. Definitely hoping to finish that pretty soon. I hope you guys have been having a lovely spring and doing lots of good reading. I'd love to hear about what you're reading down in the comments. I hope you're having a bookish and a magical day, and I'll talk to you guys again soon.